I tell you, those folks, we used to smuggle them into the lunchroom at my all-black, predominantly black high school, right? And I think they ought to say, "We want to fight you, but you can't fight me. First, why don't you fight the white boy over there?" The thing that held us all together was proof. Correct. I had no idea how much he did behind the scenes. People are talking about a call that appears to have been leaked between Proof and Eminem because it seems like Proof was attempting to warn M about something important. You already know how deep this narrative goes if you're paying any attention. Proof wasn't simply a Detroit rapper. He was M's first day, his best friend, the foundation of D12, and a local legend in his own right. Additionally, when he was murdered, back in it struck the entire scene hard in 2006. However, it fundamentally altered Eminem's life. We all went through a really difficult period with that, you know? Yes? Everybody in the gang. You understand what I mean when I say that there were a lot of people who loved Proof. It was difficult, especially for me. Yes. Do you understand? Like, it was awful, especially the first year, you know? However, most people are unaware that there were indications that he was acting differently prior to the Proof being shot. Additionally, some individuals who were before everything fell apart, he spoke with M, who was around at the time. Details of the chat have recently begun to surface, and whether they are authentic. Proof seems to have been concerned about M, and nothing he told him could help to clarify the reason M began to distance himself from Detroit. What was said by Proof during that call then, and how much did M know prior to that evening? Let's dissect what we now know. Finding methods to inspire yourself is the only way to achieve greatness, guy. I mean, you have to know what was happening in Proof's life at the time before we even discuss the call that was leaked. It wasn't just any night gone bad after all. There were indications that his surroundings were rapidly becoming disorganized. By 2006, Eminem's hype wasn't the only evidence. No longer a man. He was working on his own project. Local performances, solo music, and continued strong Detroit representation. But there was a shift in the energy around him. According to those close to him, he was worn out, anxious, and mildly suspicious. Not that he was paranoid for fleeing the police, but rather that he knew. He couldn't pinpoint it, but he knew something was coming. You're not going to back down from a fight, are you? Sort of conflicts when you know someone who is audio assaged. Who is that? It's not staged. I have you all already. Thus, we put on your condoms and beat. Being in the midst of several circles, music, hoods, industries, and personal relationships had caused Proof to cope with street politics, pressure from various sources, and general tension. Additionally, Detroit wasn't exactly a safe place for people to move around with money and fame at the time, especially if they kept it authentic, much like Proof did. Would you say that people from Detroit are different from those from other cities? Is Detroit home to a particular type of person? What distinguishes Detroit residents? Yes. Simply because, for example, in our city, there isn't a ton of work. People are saying that there isn't much here. We're only beginning to understand things here. As a result, there is a great deal of tension in the city. Subsequently, there were reports of animosity amongst some D12 members, not only with other musicians, but also with individuals, all around the scene. The typical things that turn deadly in cities where street rap still heavily overlap include jealousy, drama, and negative energy. Proof wasn't a moron either. That's what he grew up in. He was aware of how quickly things may go wrong. Because of this, it seems different when individuals claim that he was phoning members of his social circle, checking in with them, and having discreet talks that seemed a bit too serious. And what's coming up again is one of those calls, the one to Eminem. Now, that call was not an isolated incident. Evidence had been exhibiting altered behavior for a few weeks. Some claim he wasn't getting enough sleep. Some claim he was drinking more than normal. According to reports, he even confided in a close friend that he had a bad feeling something negative was about to happen. When we learned that Eminem made a last phone call, he sounded rambling, as if he was attempting to say something but not quite finishing it. It is appropriate for the timeline. The night that everything changed is where we come from. It took place at a club called CCC, a little after-hours hangout on Detroit's 8 Mile Road early on April 11, 2006. That night, Proof had gone out drinking. According to accounts he hit up earlier, it pulled up to CCC after 3 hours a.m. from another location. It was more of a neighborhood dive than a large, ostentatious club. Regulars, pool tables, late hours, the kind of place you go to after everyone else is closed. Approximately 4 a.m., Proof and another man, Keith Bender Jr., a 35-year-old veteran of the U.S. Army, got into a heated altercation while playing pool. According to witnesses, things quickly heated up, and at one point, Proof allegedly punched Bender before whipping him with a pistol. Mario Etheridge, Bender's cousin who worked club security, stepped in at that point. Etheridge initially fired a warning shot into the air, according to numerous witness accounts and police investigations. Etheridge then allegedly shot Proof several times when he turned toward him. Evidence was struck in the head and chest. He passed away right there. During the confusion, Bender was also shot. He passed away from his wounds a week later. The whole process just lasted maybe a few minutes, which is incredible. Although Proof fired at least one shot and was found to be carrying an unregistered firearm, no murder charges were brought against him. In the end, Etheridge received probation and a $2,000 fine for carrying a concealed firearm without a permit and firing a weapon inside a business. Stated differently, the courts viewed it as self-defense. Here's the problem, though. Technically, the lawsuit was over, but there were still inquiries. People were curious as to why Proof, who was renowned for maintaining composure in public, lost it like way. What set him off that evening? Was he already tense due to something else happening behind the scenes? Or was it just drink or resentment towards someone in the club? Proof's elevated blood alcohol levels and evidence of other substances were later confirmed by the toxicology result. However, that still doesn't explain why things got out of hand the way they did, or why, according to others, he was acting like something was going to blow up and making odd calls just days earlier. If that's accurate, if he genuinely contacted Eminem at that moment, the next question is clear. On that call, what was said? Here is what we do know about the call, in fact. Although there isn't a complete tape or anything that has been formally released, several people have made references to it throughout the years that suggest something genuine is taking place behind the scenes. Several days prior to his was murdered, and evidence was said to have been speaking on the phone with a few individuals. One of those calls was to Eminem, according to people close to him, including local Detroit musicians and D12 affiliates. Furthermore, according to their description, it wasn't your typical check-in. According to one person, Proof has been making passionate late-night phone calls to people in an attempt to resolve issues. According to another, he sounded as though he was attempting to tie up loose ends, as though he knew something was coming, but chose not to express it directly. This is when things start to get interesting. In subsequent interviews, Eminem discussed his emotional, rather than direct, self-blame for Proof's ordeal. That's what he said. He felt as though he had lost a part of himself that night, and he should have been there. Like how I've been able to handle it. And I suppose the healing process for me is to sort of stop berating myself for the fact that, I thought that perhaps he wouldn't have gone to that if I had spoken to him. Club M has also stated in interviews that Proof would always be honest with him, saying that even when M was slipping into addiction, Proof was one of the only people who told him straight out to get his life together. If I had, maybe if I had been with him, you know what I mean? Those were some of the thoughts that were going through my mind. Therefore, there would have been evidence if someone had been telling M that it was time to change. Evidence. To me, Proof was like, that. Yes, dude. I know that without knowing him, I would not have survived. Thus, he was a blessing to me. I also came to the realization that Proof used to constantly beat my ass. He once pounded me literally to the charnier's ground while we were boxing in the backyard. He said, "Damn, just stop." Because I kept getting up and coming at him, but I was like, damn, just stop. Man, he was quick. He moved pretty fast. The glue served as proof. That united us all, isn't it? He kept us together and inspired us by doing so much gaways behind the scenes that I was unaware of. That's the only thing you needed, so it's absurd. You only needed that one thing in your life, to feel that you were unique. Proof made me feel that way. It remains to be seen if the entire contents of that call are ever made public. However, it seems very much like that last call occurred based on the persons present at the time, and M's own statements years later. Furthermore, that Proof wasn't merely speaking for himself. Perhaps he was also attempting to keep M safe. Additionally, Eminem began acting differently when Proof passed away. Not immediately. He spoke at the burial and appeared to be in utter despair. However, he vanished totally off the grid after that. People at the time believed he was simply grieving, and it was undoubtedly a contributing factor. In several interviews, he claimed that losing the Proof was the most devastating thing that had ever happened to him, and that it caused him to descend into one of his darkest times. His addiction worsened, and in 2007, he nearly passed away from an OD. It took a while for my brain to function normally again. Yes, you were really recovering from an overdose, and they had to stabilize you with a few drugs, some of which took a moment to get used to. Why don't we just stop there? You're literally learning how to rap again then? Since it's most likely the first time you were creating for however many years without using drugs in your body? Yes. When I started rapping again, did you not ask the doctors and send it to you? I just want to make sure he doesn't have brain damage. Isn't that what you said? Yes, I did believe that you may have some long-term issues. Yes, I was definitely worried. It was more than just sentimental, though. At the very least, M was removing himself from the scene in Detroit. Unlike before, he was not spotted, out and about. And that was significant because for someone like M, whose entire identity was based on his D heritage, that shift was noticeable. He became less communicative, more secure, more secretive, and more guarded. According to some, he even ceased spending time with some of the persons who were previously involved. He seems to have closed off a significant portion of his former existence. If Proof did instruct M to depart, then Detroit, or at least keep an eye on him, it appears that M paid attention. Additionally, there is the music. Proof was everywhere in 2009 when Eminem eventually returned with a relapse. In tone as well as dedications. It was more sinister, suspicious, and intimate than whatever he has previously done. During his recuperation, he broke down in tears while discussing Proof in songs like You're Never Over. More allusions to cautions and evidence that saved M's life. When he OD'd, M even raps about how it was evidence that someone came to him and ordered him to fight back. I had a motive to fight because of you. I was headed your way. No, Duty. You're not laying on that table, you informed me. As soon as you said, think of Haley, I knew I would make it. I was aware that I would never be able to leave them, my darlings. Thus, when you line it, overall, it appears that something clicked. M seems sufficiently shaken to declare, I can't live like that anymore. Perhaps it all began with Proof's final message. Proof's passing was more than just a death. It completely altered Eminem's course. And it's obvious that something was said, regardless of whether we ever get the entire transcript of that final call. Now, some people only perceive tragedy when they read this narrative. Others, however, notice a warning that was exchanged between two buddies. One that could have prevented Eminem's death, even if Proof arrived too late. The truth is that Proof knew Detroit, so that's the bit that hits the hardest. He sensed a change in the energy. He was aware that the streets had changed. Additionally, if he truly instructed M to move differently, perhaps he was attempting to confirm at least one of them survived. However, please share your thoughts on all of this with me. Did Proof anticipate it? Did Eminem have plans to abandon that life already? Or did he actually do it after Proof's warning? Leave a comment below with your opinions. I'd also like to hear from anyone who was involved in the Detroit scene at the time or who may have heard something I didn't. Peace be with you, Proof. Shady is my name. Proof is his name. Hey, my house used to have a roof, but a mouse recently ate the cheese from the refrigerator. Refused to acknowledge that, at the age of 3, I was receiving welfare. In addition, my mother used to leave when I was 4 years old. The door would constantly be slammed by her. Proof, don't you come in? I said. Yes, come on in for that. Together, Tango, Cash, Mango, and Blast. More resilient than Alpha. Garbage. Foreign car drivers are incarcerated. It's me, indeed. My man could then wear black and white, ivory and black, and white, Ione.